Hello everybody and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Welcome home everybody. Today we're going to be doing a spoiler review and discussion for the brand new movie Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. After surviving the events of the first film, Grace is pulled back into a deadly game as multiple families hunt her and her sister in a twisted fight for power tied to the LaBelle curse. Obviously, I just covered the first Ready or Not. Huge fan of that movie, but I found myself kind of being pretty hesitant going into the second film just because I feel like the first one is a perfect little self-contained bottle thriller horror movie and didn't really see the need for a sequel in this universe, but Radio Silence was coming back, so of course I kind of had to check it out here, and I just went into it hoping it would be at least fun like the original is. So we are going to jump into the review section for this movie, starting with the positives or just the things that I enjoyed most about this movie. And I always really appreciate continuity within movies and sequels, and I love how this second movie picks up immediately after the first movie. We catch up with Grace sitting on that back patio, the whole mansion's burning down, she's covered into blood, and we actually get to sit in on the aftermath just a little bit for a second, kind of watching her pass out after she is fully accepting and realizing the events of the first film, and as that all kind of hits her, as the police are talking to her, she just kind of passes out. So I think it was a really strong continuation that kind of respects the ending of the first one, provides you that smooth transition, and never really brushes past the severity of the events we just witnessed. And I also just appreciate how the police here get involved immediately within the second or third scene. I think that totally makes sense for the events of the first film. This entire wealthy family just mysteriously dies, and Grace is the only survivor drenched in all of their blood. I think it would be ridiculous if the police didn't get involved when Grace is sent to the hospital, because I like how the movie just acknowledges how suspicious that really looks and helps to ground this story just a little bit more. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the addition of Grace's sister kind of coming into the mix here, but I think it is a pretty big positive for this movie. We spend so much time in the first movie and now this movie following these twisted rich families, so it's actually pretty refreshing getting to see a victim side and their family just a little bit more. It kind of helps to flesh out Grace's character more and kind of gives her that additional element to keep fighting for and adds a bit more of that emotional weight you're kind of looking for. And just like the first movie, I adore how this movie kind of doesn't waste any time, is very quick moving, and doesn't waste any time into getting into the game aspect of this premise. Just like the first movie, the hunting starts pretty quickly, which gives that quick pacing and gives that same chaotic energy I feel like the first film did super well. And I also like kind of the small little details they add in here to try to make this feel a little bit different from the first one. The idea here that each family can only use weapons to hunt Grace and her sister from the time period that they made the deal with this demonic cult is such a fun, unique concept. It leads to some use of unique weapons being used, gives this a slightly different kind of flavor to it, even though that core concept is still the same. And I do have my issues, which we'll obviously get into, but overall I would say this premise still really works for me. Even though this one is a bit longer, I think like 10-15 minutes, I never really felt the runtime when I was watching it. Watching multiple families hunting Grace and her sister for power is just inherently very entertaining, and the movie leans into that chaotic, over-the-top side that really keeps this experience pretty engaging. Samara Weaving in here is, again, perfectly casted, pretty much an iconic scream queen at this point. She fully commits to this role in a way that feels so effortless. There is no hesitation this time within her Grace character, no uncertainty whatsoever. She knows exactly the situation that she is about to get into and kind of just embraces that more badass side to her. I love watching her flip into that full revenge side she has, especially when she grabs a shotgun at one point and it actually works this time, unlike she was trying to do in the first movie. Just starts blasting people, is so genuinely awesome. She is iconic in this role, and I cannot wait to see what she does in the future. And speaking of Samara Weaving, I think that leads directly into my biggest positive for this movie, which is the third act. And I feel like this is where the movie really leans into its chaotic premise, does something a little bit different, but then also finds something that it kind of wants to say. Throughout the story, we get teased at this loophole within this demonic cult that all these families signed up for, and Grace finds out that she could survive if she marries into one of the families and essentially sells her soul to the devil. It's a great twist on the rules that we have come to understand, and again, kind of does something a little bit different. So she ends up trying to marry one of the final families that is hunting her to save herself and just kind of give up a little bit just in order to save her and, more importantly, her sister. And it leads to this cool looking demonic underground kind of wedding where everyone's dressed in black, everyone's worshiping Satan, and it leads to a great sacrifice moment that you think it's leading to, because Grace is choosing to marry one of them to save her sister, which again adds this layer of tragedy and desperation that I felt like the movie was really leading to all throughout its runtime. And once we get to this beautiful demonic cult wedding, I think that scene is fantastic. This dark demonic ceremony kind of builds up a little as Samara Weaving says "I do" in that moment, and then immediately kills and stabs the guy that she was gonna marry. It's such a satisfying subversion of what you maybe kind of expected in that moment, and reinforces that Grace as a character is always kind of planning and trying to do her best to think one step ahead. And I love the final sequence that it leads to, because once Grace does that, she puts on the demonic ring, recognizes that she is now holding all the power, but then wants to give it up. And turns out in these family rules, there's really no rule saying somebody can't do that, just as long as somebody is wearing that ring and has the power again before dawn strikes, that is going to be the new royal family, essentially. And within this final sequence, Samara Weaving just tosses the ring into this sacrificial kind of pit, and all of the remaining families and members are fighting over this ring before dawn strikes, and it is absolutely chaotic in the best way possible. Watching all these demonic families just turn on each other while Grace and her sister just kind of sit back and watch it all happen feels very intentional here. And Grace here doesn't just survive, she kind of again takes more control of the situation and ultimately allows evil to defeat itself by destroying itself. So it's very poetic, it fits the story, and to me is the strongest part of this sequel. However, with that said, let's jump into the negatives, or the things that I just felt really disappointed me. And unfortunately, I gotta say, this experience, while many things that I did enjoy, I left feeling kind of disappointed and pretty mixed here. I think the biggest issue right away that stood out to me is they kind of abandon what made the original premise so fun, which was really leaning into that game aspect, especially the initial setup of hide and seek. And in here, it kind of disappears. Like they get to the hunting game, but remove the fun choosing the game kind of premise, which I felt like was kind of weird. Instead, here, once Grace and her sister are just kind of captured again from the hospital, they are then handcuffed and just left in the middle of a golf course, which completely changes the dynamics. Like it doesn't really feel like a game. Like if at that point, why not just keep them in the room and see which family gets to shoot them first? Like it didn't really lean into that premise anymore. And because of that, it kind of stops feeling like a tight, contained thriller and more like a watered down comedic version of the Hunger Games. And within the setting these events are taking place in, it's this huge mansion on a golf course, but they never really use that to their advantage. You kind of lose that claustrophobic one location tension, and with that, you lose a lot of what made the first movie so special to me. And unfortunately, the humor is such a big negative and a big step down from the first one. The first one had comedy, but it felt very natural and character driven and more situational. But here it leans way too much into obvious gags, bits, and quips that just did not land for me. You get a character that's playing video games during demonic talks and mid-chaos, someone showing up to a ritual high, like that's supposed to be a laugh out loud moment, people fumbling with their guns and ammunition for cheap laughs. It just feels sillier and kind of really undercuts the tone instead of enhancing it. And this movie really falls into that sequel problem where bigger does not always equal better. And here, expanding the world to include all these different families connected to the cult, it's very interesting in theory, but it kind of loses the intimacy the first one had. And that leads to a big overall issue where it falls into that sequel trap. The simplicity of the first movie was its strength, and by expanding and overcomplicating everything here, it just kind of left me with diminishing returns. The idea that these families all made deals with the LaBelle family and are now competing for power, again, is very interesting, but in execution, it kind of feels like the first story again, just stretched thinner. Now, multiple families are doing what one family did, and because of that, the story kind of feels weaker to me. The original had this clear emotional core of Grace searching for love, acceptance, in this new family, only to be completely betrayed by her husband and her husband's family. It's simple, but it works. And here they try to replicate that structure, but with multiple families, and it just doesn't hit the same. It kind of becomes a little repetitive and honestly very predictable. I felt like I knew exactly where this movie was headed the moment it kind of started. None of these new families or characters are as interesting as the Ladamus family from the first one. They lack personality, any real depth, and don't really seem all that distinct. Like they kind of all just blend together for me. I couldn't tell you one thing about any of these families. They all just seem psychotic demon worshippers, and that's really it. And by introducing all of these random families, they again lose a big piece of what made the first one work so well, is that connection to Grace. The movie loses that personal betrayal angle entirely. The emotional hook, the one that made the first one hit harder, is completely gone here. And I really hate to say it, but I feel like I need to talk to the directors of Radio Silence here. They really need to switch up their endings because at this point, it's becoming a pattern. I enjoyed the third act, but the ending note is beyond ridiculous about how many times they've fucking done this. Once again, we get the same kind of finale with the demonic cult members all exploding, which it's fun to see, but you're like, okay, you've done this so many times. The final final girl is covered in blood, walking away from the chaos. And Radio Silence has done this almost like 5 times now. They did it in the first Ready or Not, Abigail, pretty much Scream 5 and Scream 6, and now this. It just feels like their ending notes that they leave all their movies on are the exact same ending notes with a little bit different of a path of getting there. So it's just so frustrating because I feel like the next time Radio Silence comes out with a movie, I'm going to be like, it looks interesting now, but I guarantee you it's going to be a final girl going ape shit on the villains and walking away covered in blood. Like, you can't do it 5 times in a row. So super disappointing that exact same ending note. It's like they're all just copying Cabin in the Woods at this point. But with that said, I will say that overall, Ready or Not 2, while still fun and elevated by Samara Weaving and a strong third act, the sequel goes bigger instead of smarter, losing the intimacy, originality, and unpredictability that made the first film work so well. So with that said, I feel like for my rating for this movie, this is a difficult one because overall, it's not like I hated myself watching it. I just felt very disappointed, and when they announced it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And now after I saw it, I'm like, yeah, super unneeded. But if you're a fan of the first one, it's worth checking out if you want some more of the same flavor here. So for me, I will say it's that kind of good streaming movie. Like, if I want this experience again, I'm just gonna watch the first one because it is way better. But if you want to see this, I'd wait for streaming. I don't even know if it's worth a couple bucks renting, maybe like that 99-cent rental. That's as far as I'd go for it, unfortunately, here. But you guys have my thoughts here. Please let me know down below what you thought of Ready or Not 2. Here I come. What was your anticipation for it? Did you feel like it was necessary? Did it live up to your expectations, or do you wish they kind of just kept this a single film? Let me know all that information down below. And yeah, that's about it. I appreciate anybody watching my videos. It means so much to me, so thanks again. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.